this is Lisa again, Healing Waters Mind and Body Float Studio. I'm the owner. You might have watched a couple of our other videos trying to get you ready for your float, or if you have any questions. So we're going to go over some of the most frequently asked questions and answers. That way, when you come in, you're a little bit more prepared and have some idea of how we work things here. So a couple of the things people always call and ask, what do I need to know before I come in for my float session? You don't really need to know much of anything. Obviously, we send you the instructional video ahead of time so you can watch that, kind of be more comfortable about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what's going to go on and what you have available to you in your room. So people ask if they should be bringing a swimsuit. The answer is no. You're welcome to bring one if you'd like, if you're uncomfortable with floating in your birthday suit, but you definitely don't have to bring one. We don't recommend it. You're actually floating in a sensory deprivation tank. So if we can avoid any sort of sensory input, whether that be shorts rubbing against your leg, or we all know that swimsuits can kind of get uncomfortable to begin with. And then we're also not introducing any sort of laundry detergents or anything on clothing or swimsuits or anything like that into our tanks. So you're going in complete sensory deprivation. If you can go in with very little or nothing on the body, that's what we prefer. And that's what we would recommend to you. If by chance you're feeling a little uncomfortable with that, first of all, know that you will have your own private room here. I know that not all float studios in the world have their own float rooms that are private. You have to use maybe like a locker room or something like that to shower before and after, but everything that you need is in your room for you ahead of time. So all of your towels, washcloths, floor mats, your shampoo, conditioner, body wash, eardrops, your Q-tips for your ears, cotton balls, everything you need is already here. With that being said, know that we do use as much as we can to stay green here. So when we clean our tanks, when we clean our floors, we use white distilled vinegar and water. That's what we use for infection, but we also add a little bit of simple green to that to cut out on that vinegar smell. That vinegar can often smell like you're coming into an Easter egg facility. So we use the simple green to cut down on the vinegar smell a little bit. We do use like Purex or things that are somewhat scent free, but just know that there are some scents that you might be introduced to before or after your float, whether that be with our shampoos, conditioners, body washes, lotions. So if that's stuff that you're a little hypersensitive to, or you just don't want to introduce any sensory input to your body before or after your float, please feel free to bring your own special shampoos and conditioners that you prefer. So sometimes people ask about the salt that we have. When you come into the studio, you might see some retail items. We're not really a retail place. I don't want to make money off retail stuff. Our whole focus here is healing and healing through sensory deprivation tanks. So you'll see that we have the Epsom salts here. Initially, I had those as our display bags because I wanted to show people the difference between good Epsom salt, which we use the USP grade, which is a pharmaceutical grade of Epsom salt. So we know that there aren't any metals. Every batch is tested, and we know what our people are floating in. We started selling them because people wanted to buy my display bags. So in the very beginning, I had 6 bags total. I got down to 1 bag, and so the next time I ordered 20 bags, and now we're selling that within a month or so. So the reason that we sell them here is because obviously I get them much cheaper because I own a float studio, so I order 3,000 to 5,000 pounds at a time. I get it much cheaper, and so I sell it to my clients for pretty much my cost. So it's generally 20 or 30% of the cost that you buy kind of the big rocky, cloudy, crappy stuff in the stores that have added scents to them or added oils to them. We don't want to destroy the Epsom salts by any means. So we sell the pharmaceutical grade here inside the studio. You'll also see that we sell very huge thread count sheets, generally between 15 and 1800 thread count. We do that again because I get them inexpensive and I pass on that savings to my clients, just because people don't buy themselves good sheets anymore. Your bed is one of your most important places in your home to get rest and to heal, and so we just do it as a benefit to our clients. We sell them to our clients for what I get them for. We also have jewelry such as this. This is by one of my clients. Her name is Kim Conrad. She suffers from a traumatic brain injury, which she's okay with me sharing. She oftentimes has her books inside here for sale, vice versa, and she also sells chicken soup for the soul for traumatic brain injury patients. She suffered a traumatic brain injury, and this is how she supports herself. So I don't make money or anything off of these. I just do stuff like that to help out some of my clients to live their lives better. So a lot of times people will ask, oh my gosh, 90 minutes, is that the least amount of time you can do? Can I maybe do a 30 or 60 minute to start out? What I explain to people, my background is in law enforcement, but all of my degrees are in psychology. My master's is in forensic psychology. So what I explain to people is the REM cycle, which is where we go into our dream states and basically our healing state or our meditative state. It generally lasts approximately 3 hours. So generally by the time people get in the tank, they spend 20 minutes on the inversion table. And even if they don't want to do the full 20, they'll generally spend only about 70 to 80 minutes total inside the tank. By the time you get into the tank and start to lay back and relax, it takes a little bit for the brain to switch over to those theta brainwave states. So basically what I tell people is that REM cycle, we need to allow the brain to get into that space so that it can shut down to heal. And if we're getting out in 30 or 60 minutes, we really don't give the brain a chance to even reach the REM cycle, much less get into that sacred space for healing. So when you get in, you let the brain shut down. It's searching for sensory input. It's not finding any light, sound, smell, or gravity. And it's like, okay, we're safe. So it pulls back the stress hormones, shuts down the pain receptors, and it basically shuts down the fight and flight responses, which allow the body and brain to go into almost a deep healing or a forced meditative state. So doing those shorter sessions really is not beneficial. We want to give the body and brain time to shut down. If you think about 200 years ago, what we used to do in order to take care of our bodies and brains, there were no lights on at night. Once the sun went down, you were basically done for the day. So in the wintertime, when the sun goes down at 5 or 6 p.m., or in the summertime, when the sun goes down sometime between 8 and 10 p.m., you're basically done for the day back then. So we were able to shut down and actually get some rest and let our bodies and brains heal. If you ask me, the neck and neck in technology and our ability to basically never get away from anything or ever anyone, and our neck and neck with our inability to heal ourselves, all of the cancers, fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis, lupus, those are not coincidental. And it's because we don't let our bodies and brains shut down anymore. So this pulls back the pain receptors, shuts down stress hormones. So those natural endorphins or our natural feel-goods of the body can actually do what they're created to do. They can go throughout our system, help heal us, and make us feel better. So I kind of joke around with people sometimes and say sometimes you come out feeling a little bit high, one way or the other. Either just smoked a doobie high or ready to run around the block and get a bunch of stuff done high. Some people, they say that they feel kind of half and half. They feel a little bit high, like as in very lucid, calm, very clear thought processes, but they're able to still get all of their stuff done during the day. They almost feel rejuvenated when they come out of the tank. And what I also like to let people know is that each float is going to be different. So I've done, well over 100 floats at this point, and no two floats are the same really. It really just depends on what my body and brain need for that day. So sometimes I'll come out, I'll feel rejuvenated, I'm on my game, I get a bunch of stuff done. And then sometimes I come out of the float tank and I really just want to go home and take a nap and get some rest and just kind of ride out that float, so to speak, and just kind of relax for the rest of the day. So no two floats are really the same. I do like to tell people, give it more than just one chance. Floating is new to people. Most people have never experienced floating. Most people don't know how to meditate very well. Most people don't know how to get inside a sensory deprivation tank and be without light, sound, smell, gravity. They get a little bit anxious. They want to get out early because they get bored. So what I tell people at all times is basically stay in as long as you possibly can. The reason is a couple of things. First of all, your body and brain will get the chance to shut down. Second of all, we put about 1,000 pounds of pharmaceutical grade Epsom salt inside each tank. So Inside one little water molecule, you have hundreds of salt molecules. Those are all being absorbed into your skin. That's why you feel like very soft, kind of like a baby's butt. That's why your hair feels so nice, is because all of these Epsom salts are being absorbed into the body. We think of Epsom salts as being drying, but they're not. It's not really a salt, it's a mineral. They call them salts because it pretty much tastes like salt and it looks like salt, but it's actually a mineral that's putting back into your body, not taking from it. So I try to let people know, stay in until the end, even if you have to sit up for a little while, if you want to bounce off the walls, which a lot of people like to do because it feels like floating in outer space. So a lot of people like to bounce around in there and kind of play with that anti-gravity feeling. But in the end, generally, you'll take home between like 1 and 3 pounds of Epsom salts within or inside your system. So it's now circulating through the bloodstream, detoxifying the blood, the organs, the brain, helps with blood sugar levels, blood circulation, and a host of other things. So if you're here for your 90-minute session, and remember, 90 minutes is where we start. We actually do 3-hour sessions, 6-hour sessions, and overnighters here as well. And I know that sounds like a bit much for those of you out there that maybe are just starting to float or have never floated before. But once you actually start floating and understanding what it's about and getting used to floating, then you start craving those longer periods of time without that gravitational pull, the tossing and turning in bed at night. And what they are showing is that 1 hour of rest in the tank is equivalent to several hours of solid REM sleep. So I know it sounds like a lot, but take advantage of the amount of time that you have scheduled for you. We schedule your floats out for you 2 hours at a time. So it's a 90-minute session, but 2 full hours in the room. So if you have the time, you may as well take advantage of the anti-gravity, the Epsom salts, and basically the sensory deprivation to allow your body and brain to heal for that period of time that we have allotted for you. So we often get asked maybe who can't float or how old you have to be to float. We really don't have an age limit. I think our youngest that we've had here floating, he's about 6. He suffers from Asperger's autism spectrum. And obviously we know with autism and some Asperger's that they have a lot of issues with sensory overload. And so the sensory deprivation tanks are fantastic for them. But I do know that at the float conferences out in Portland, we've talked to a lady that has her float tanks in Brazil, and she's been floating her children since birth. And so she had one that was very colicky, and so as soon as she would place her inside the water, we jokingly say that it's like returning to the mother's womb or floating in space at 0 gravity. But for babies, it probably is very similar to that. So we do have people that start floating their children at birth or from very young ages. Basically, the way that I explain it to parents is that as long as your child can understand that this is a lot of salt in a very little bit of water and not to get it in their eyes or up their nose because it does not feel good, then they're pretty safe in floating. So my child that's 4, I can tell her not to get the salt water in the eyes, but she is probably not going to listen to me. And when she does get it in her eyes, that will pretty much ruin floating for her for a pretty good long time. So what I let people know is as long as your child can understand not to get the salt water in their eyes and that they're there for sensory deprivation purposes, we can pretty much accommodate any age as long as the parent's okay with them floating. The only other concern that we ever have is people that have uncontrolled epilepsy or uncontrolled seizures. You really can't fall under the water in there. It's only 10 inches deep, and even still the water is so dense that it is not really possible to sink under the water, so we don't worry about that. We just worry that nobody would know that somebody would be in there having a seizure and be able to provide any sort of assistance, even though it might be one of the safer places to have a seizure because of the dense water and the fact that they hopefully would not be able to injure themselves. So those are generally the 2 areas that I try to explain to people. Outside of that, I always tell people, and you'll probably hear me say this numerous times, I'm biased because I own this place, but I honest to God believe that this can help anybody with anything. So we deal with people here. As I mentioned earlier, my background is in psychology. We deal with people here, including myself. I've dealt with depression and anxiety for a long time, insomnia, PTSD. We have people that come in with addictions to drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, pills type stuff that feel like this really curbs or even eliminates the cessation of addiction. We deal with a lot of people with physical ailments, anywhere from just minor aches and pains, injuries from running or working out, to people that are dealing with multiple sclerosis, cancer, fibromyalgia, lupus, many different ailments that they really feel like this is one of the only things that helps with pain and toxin relief. And then we have people that use this for performance enhancers. So a lot of professional MMA fighters, UFC fighters, Bronco players, avalanche players, professional and amateur athletes, people that do marathons, because not only does this help to eliminate or alleviate some of the aches and pains from working out or running or bouts, but it helps to increase performance, endurance, and stamina. So a lot of our people will use this before and after any of those things that they have coming up. So even though I am biased because I own this, I would have never opened this place if I didn't believe in it. And I think that with, at this point, 2015, we've been open in a little over 2 years. We've done close to 12,000 sessions, and I think that that speaks for itself. We try to really do well by people, and we really try to make sure that any experience they have here is as close to as good as it gets, and that they receive some sort of healing, whether it's mental, physical, emotional, or spiritual. Also, we get a lot of questions about pregnancy and if this is good for pregnant women. Again, like I said, I really don't think that there's one thing out there that this can't help with, and pregnancy is a huge one. I have women that start floating from the early onset of symptoms and the early stages of their pregnancy all the way through. I had a lady call me on her way to her appointment. She went into labor. She was very upset that she didn't get to get that one last float in before she gave birth. So this takes the gravitational pull off the body. It lets the woman's body displace over the top of the water with the anti-gravity, which then allows the baby to move around, which sometimes the moms don't prefer just because they want to go into the sensory deprivation tank and relax. But when those babies have some room to move around and get into better positions because of the anti-gravity and the mom's body being displaced over the water, sometimes they take that opportunity. So I really do think that this works for absolutely everybody, and pregnancy is definitely one of those things. So absolutely yes, sensory deprivation tanks are fantastic for pregnant women. We also get some questions about if these are sanitary and if there's enough air inside the tank, because some people deal with claustrophobia. So let me answer a few of those things. You might have heard some of this stuff on our other video as well, the instructional video, but I just like to go over it again because we do have about 20 to 30% of the population that will have some sort of fear or phobia to do with the tank. The most common: darkness, silence, being alone, and drowning. And then of course the enclosed spaces is the biggest one. So what I tell people is a couple of things. First of all, there's always plenty of room inside the tanks. They are sensory deprived, but they are not airtight. There are 4 air holes in the back of the tank that assist with air circulation. 2 are under the water, 2 are above the water. And you can also turn on a fan, which is hooked over one of the air holes if you need a little bit of extra air. We don't recommend it because of the sensory deprivation, but some people that are dealing with asthma or emphysema, or let's face it, these are very humid inside, and so some of us Denverites, it's a real punch in the face when you get inside the tank. And so if you need a little bit of extra airflow, we do have an extra fan hooked up to the back of one of the air vents in the back. But there's plenty of air, so you don't have to worry about that. The secondary thing is the sanitary stuff. I asked the same questions when I went into a sensory deprivation tank. We all know that we're going in there naked, and so other people have been in there naked. So what I like to tell people is that we use 50 of these size bags. These are 20-pound bags of pharmaceutical grade Epsom salt. We generally don't use these particular bags because these are our bags that we sell to our clients because they want the good stuff. We actually use 50-pound bags. Kind of looks like one of those big cement bags. But anyhow, these size bags, we would use the equivalent of about 50 of these bags in one tank. So I'm sure you've all heard of the Dead Sea. It's pretty much called the Dead Sea because nothing can survive in there because of all of the salt in the water. per square inch, we use about 7 times the amount of salt in our water that the Dead Sea even has. So that's why the water is so buoyant. That's why in one water molecule you have several salt molecules inside there, and that's why that water molecule doesn't bend when you lay on top of it, which is why you float like a cork on the top of the water. That being said, it's pretty much the cleanest water you'll ever sit in because there's so much salt in the water, bacteria doesn't survive. It's pretty much killed on contact. On top of that, we have 3 filtration systems built into the back of every tank, which we run in between every session, and we run several times at night while we are closed on a timer. So anything that might be let loose in the water, like head hairs or sock lint or something like that, is picked up by one of the 3 filtration systems. So again, cleanest water you'll sit in. You can pretty much go home, scrub your bathtub and your shower with bleach and vinegar, and then take a full body scrub down, and when you finally sit in your bath water, you will still be floating in your own bacteria. In here, it does not survive. So sanitary wise, you are perfectly good on that. Lastly, when we talk about claustrophobia, as I mentioned in the other video, claustrophobia technically does not exist when the brain cannot sense a boundary. So if the brain can't sense boundaries, meaning you go in and close the door and you're in complete silence, the brain doesn't know if you're in a tiny little pillbox or if you're floating in the wide open universe. So generally, people get themselves all worked up and anxious about getting inside the tank. They think that they're going to feel overwhelmed with being enclosed or claustrophobic, but probably 99% of the time, the anxiety that got the best of them, they get inside the tank and they're like, oh, this isn't as bad as I thought it would be. It's actually very calm and relaxing. So you shouldn't have to worry about that either. Okay. Sanitary claustrophobia.
Did you set their alarm for like 10 minutes after? Or
I did not. I set it at 6:30.
Okay.
So we'll wrap up real quick and then we'll change it over.
Okay, cool.
Okay. People often ask, how often do I recommend you float? I'm very careful with this because I've dealt with injuries and depression and stuff in the past, and I think that sometimes I asked how often I needed to be there. It wasn't always out of making sure that it was the best case scenario for my injury. It was more about their pocketbook. So I don't want people to ever feel like I'm recommending to them in order for them to spend their money. Instead, what I tell people is that if time and money were never an issue, I would recommend that you come in and float at least once a week. Our bodies and brains really need it to heal. 200 years ago, we didn't have to worry about all this sensory overload. When the sun went down, like I said earlier, you were done for the day. Now we have to worry about sensory overload, and our brains and bodies really need that time to heal. So if time and money were never an issue, I would tell people, get in here and float and get into that sensory deprivation. Let your body and brain heal at least once a week. But time and money are an issue for people. So instead, what I tell people is that you know your body and brain better than anyone. When you feel like, okay, I just can't make it any longer, most of my clients float once a week or once every 2 weeks. Some people are like 10 days is my max. So when you know that your body and brain are in need of the sensory deprivation, you look at your pocketbook, you look at your schedule, and when all 3 of those things line up, we're here. Okay. All right, final stuff. Okay, so we're wrapping up and hoping you're getting some information out of here that will benefit you and answer some questions. I want to answer some things with our specific location and explain a couple of things, just because we do our best to make this place perfect, but there's some things that people don't like, and it's pretty much a constant consensus, and so I want to explain those. First of all, people have a hard time calling in and getting us to answer the phone to make appointments. We apologize in advance. The reason is I'm a very big proponent on very good VIP customer service skills. I personally don't like when I have made an appointment to be with somebody and they put me on hold to answer another call to make the next sale. I feel like when I've paid for my appointment to be there in front of you, hopefully you are giving me your undivided attention, and if we are face to face for a conversation, you're not going to put your hand in my face and tell me to hold on while you get the next sale. So I apologize in advance, but we really are trying to give people face-to-face communication and not interrupt conversations when our phone rings, which is quite often. Our goal is always to return calls within 60 minutes. Sometimes we can do that. Sometimes we are very swamped and have 22 messages waiting. So we do our very best to give you a call back, but I wanted to explain that to our clients that are out there, that if you can book online, please do so. If you can't, please leave us a message, or you're welcome to blow up our phone if you'd like. Just keep calling back, and we will get to the phones as quickly as we can, but we want to give you individual attention when you're here. We've also had some questions or concerns about a cancellation policy. Because we are booked pretty well solid, and right now our tanks are booking out anywhere from a couple of days to 3 or 5 weeks in advance, depending on the day and time, we do have a 24-hour cancellation policy. Obviously, if there's an emergency or a severe illness that comes up, we try to work with you where we can. But we do have people waiting in line for tanks. So if you give us that 24 hours, oftentimes we're able to get that tank filled with somebody that's also waiting in line for a session. If it's under 24 hours, we will do everything in our power to call people on the wait list and try to get somebody into that tank. And if we can get it filled with somebody on the wait list or somebody calling same day for an appointment, then we obviously will not charge you for your appointment. But if we are unable to fill that tank and we were given less than a 24 hours notice, we have to stick by our cancellation policy, because we have a lot of people, unfortunately, that do no call, no shows, and we can't afford to keep doing that. So hopefully you understand. Okay, so we covered a lot of stuff. These are the frequently asked questions and answers. What I will tell you too is that they're also listed on our website with a lot more information and testimonials, which we're also planning to get on video here soon. So if you guys want to go to our website, it's just at healingwatersfloatstudio.com. Our phone number here is 303-466-5200. If you have any other questions or concerns, please feel free to give us a call. If you want to talk to me directly, I am here. So I'm not this unreachable owner that's not in my studio. I'm very passionate about what we do here. And if you want to talk to me directly, I'm more than happy to do that. Again, my name is Lisa. I'm the owner at Healing Waters Float Studio. We'll see you floating soon. Have a good rest of your day.